Raman Jika. Welcome everyone to our professional learning session, Climate Creatives. It's great to have so many teachers here today. I'm Verity from Environment Education Victoria, and I'd like to start first by acknowledging the First Nations people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, both here in Bacchus Marsh, where I am, and all the places you're joining us from today around Victoria. I'm on the land of the Woiwurrung and the Wathaurong people of the Kulin Nation, and I extend my respects to elders past, present and future of all First Nations. And I uphold their connection to the land, air, waters, culture and all living things, as well as their knowledge and stories. I'd also like to acknowledge all of you for making time and space to come together today and extend and share knowledge about approaching sustainability in creative ways. 85 teachers registered for this session today across all year levels, really, right from early childhood all the way through to year 12, and some from the TAFE sector as well, from disciplines such as art, visual art, English, geography, science, sustainability, VCAL subjects, math, biology, environmental science, digital technology, humanities, chemistry. So it's clear there is a hunger out there for examples of teaching sustainability with creative arts-based approaches. So we have just 1 hour together this afternoon for our session. It's one of 6 PDs we're running across terms 3 and 4 under the Stories of Sustainability banner. The aim is to provide an opportunity for teachers to hear stories of sustainability and environmental learning and to share in that learning. This series is funded by the Department of Education and Training's Strategic Partnerships Program, and I thank them very much for their partnership. I wanted to run this session because arts-based approaches can play a key role in supporting students to process information and think about the environment and sustainability in different ways, often providing mediums through which to express thoughts and feelings about big issues like global warming, helping to create optimism, empowerment and innovative solutions. Across the next hour, using the chat function, please share a creative approach that you have used for supporting your students learning about the environment and sustainability. I'm going to collate your responses and email them to you all as an ideas list. If you're happy to, also include your email address alongside your suggestion or your idea. So that another teacher can contact you to find out more about your approach if they're interested. Given that there are so many teachers joining us today, I thought this would be an efficient way to share different creative approaches amongst all of us. When I email you the ideas list, I'd also like to include a link to a 2-minute evaluation for this session. You completing the evaluation not only helps us improve our PDs, but it also helps us to keep offering them. So we're going to see 2 examples today of creative approaches to sustainability education from Templestowe College and from St. Columba's Primary School. I'd love to showcase more, but time is limited. After each presentation, there'll be a few minutes for Q&A. So it's my pleasure to welcome Meg Bailey, who's the learning area leader of science at Templestowe College. Meg teaches junior science classes as well as BCE environmental science. In her past life, Meg was a meteorologist, and her passion for climate science and sustainability pervades all her classroom practice. While teaching in Darwin over a period of 10 years and as part of her school's Reconciliation Action Plan team, Meg also developed an interest in the depth of knowledge held by First Nations people of the interconnectedness of ecosystems and the forecasting power of astronomy and natural indicators. And this has subsequently driven the integration of First Nations cultural perspectives into her school's science curriculum and is leading the process for auditing other subjects to increase awareness and respect for First Nations knowledge across the whole school community. Today, Meg is going to present a really interesting approach she's developed that combines First Nations perspectives, scientific drawing and environmental research to create beautiful and informative visual art. So welcome to you, Meg, and also welcome to your student, one of your students that's joined us too, Delano. I'll just unmute you.
Thank you, Verity. Hello, everyone. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land where I live and work, the Woiwurrung of the Kulin Nation, and extend my respect to the traditional custodians, past, present, and emerging, and all of you and the lands where you are around Victoria. So I'll just share my screen with you. I've got a PowerPoint to lead you through what I've developed. Okay, you'll see that okay? Yep. All right. That's great. There we go. Okay, so the context of this activity that I'm going to talk you through is developed for a Year 7 science class. So at Templestowe College, we call this entry science, our entry year at our Year 7s. It's a cross-curricular project that incorporates Indigenous perspectives and art, as well as science and a little bit of geography. And I developed this as part of our ecology unit. So we do a classic kind of living things unit that most students cover in Year 7. So characteristics of living things, abiotic and biotic factors, the differences in cell structure between animals and plants, and using microscopes and drawing scaled scientific illustrations. We also covered seasons previously, so there was some underlying knowledge, and when we covered seasons, we did cover some Indigenous perspectives of astronomy, so that linked into this activity as well. As mentioned by Verity, we have a RAP, a reconciliation action plan at Templestowe College, and as part of the RAP, you identify different things that you are committing to as a school. And at our school, we've committed to developing our curriculum so that we try and embed Indigenous knowledge throughout, as well as acknowledging country, or building an understanding in our students of what an acknowledgement of country is, as opposed to a welcome to country, as well as taking action against racism and some of those other things that are listed there. So it's a bit of a convoluted process. So I'll talk you through how this kind of came about, and hopefully you'll get a good understanding of this activity by the end. So we start this by understanding the different biomes across Australia and looking at, you know, why different biomes are as they are. And obviously I'm a meteorologist by training, so I can bring into this a fair amount of scientific detail, but generally speaking, we have this big desert area across the middle of Australia. We have the tropics in the north, and we have the cooler Mediterranean climate in the south. And we talk about what kinds of plants and animals you might find across those different parts. Then we look at the Indigenous map of all the language groups. I'm sure you've seen this before. And we talk about, you know, so even though parts of Australia are desert, that there are still lots of Indigenous groups that inhabit those places that we might not think are habitable, and talk about, you know, how would you find food and water and other resources in all those different biomes across Australia. And there's a little research activity where I get students to have a look at or choose a language group and then zoom in and kind of work out what would it be like to live there. Then we have an even closer look at the language groups around where we are that make up the Kulin Nations, and talk about that these are identified by the languages that they speak, and traditionally that there are these processes you would go through if you're moving from one area into another, and that process of seeking permission to go into someone else's land, and that there is, you know, there are cultural norms that you would know, and that there would be consequences for breaking the laws or not being respectful. So at this point, I usually show a video of a welcome to country. There's a really lovely video by Joy Murphy reading her book about, it's a welcome to country story. But there's some really fantastic other videos around that you can get on YouTube. And also I get students to practice an acknowledgement of country. So to kind of give them a bit of a script and then have a practice with their partner, you know, actually saying it, so that they build up that familiarity and the confidence to actually perform an acknowledgement of country, and to also encourage them that when they go to other places to think about whose land are they on, and, you know, acknowledge the traditional owners of all those different parts of Australia. So this launches us into this, you know, different parts of Australia. There are different nations of Indigenous people, and they each have, they each hold knowledge about those places and the natural environments that's built up over millennia and has, you know, enabled them to survive and thrive in those places. So this is a really fantastic resource from the Bureau of Meteorology. It's a website. It's IWK, which is Indigenous Weather Knowledge. And this is something that I learned about when I was working for the Bureau of Meteorology in Darwin. I was a forecaster up there, and I met a woman called Janelle who was, she was from Elcho Island, an Aboriginal woman from Elcho Island, and she was very generous in sharing her knowledge. And I ended up bringing her into the office at the Bureau and getting her to do a presentation about Indigenous knowledge of the seasons up there and the natural indicators. And this was the first time that meteorologists had actually listened to a traditional owner talk about the Indigenous seasons. So it was a pretty big thing at the time, and it inspired me to kind of try and bring Indigenous knowledge into the scientific kind of forum a little bit more. So anyway, that stuck with me, and I am very passionate about that, and I love teaching this lesson to my students. So this is an interactive map. Now we talk about, so there's all those different nations all over Australia, but so many of them aren't represented on this map. So why are there not seasonal calendars for every single language group? And then we talk about, well, that knowledge may have been lost, maybe it's still in the process of being gathered. Who would be collecting that information? But each of these ones that are actually on here are interactive. So you can click on these. I'm just going to show you the website briefly. So if you go in here and you click on one of these, now you notice that the Wurundjeri one from where we are, that's not actually on this map. The Gary word is, so the one from around the Grampians. Tiwi, Jawoyn, that's around Kakadu. This is a really nice one. So this is a really great activity you could do as a standalone. You could actually get students to choose a nation that's on this map and then go in and do a research project about the Indigenous season. So often they are described by what the weather is actually doing, but then there are these bio indicators as well of, you know, what plants are flowering, what animals might you see, what part of their breeding cycle are they in. So that's a nice resource. So from here we go into the Wurundjeri seasonal calendar. So there's some great resources on the Melbourne Museum website about the seasonal calendar from this region, and it's broken up into 7 seasons. So that's another point of discussion you can have, is traditionally we talk about having 4 seasons, whereas traditionally Indigenous people acknowledge 7 seasons. In fact, it's a bit controversial. Apparently, some Indigenous people say 6, some say 7. So this extra season that sometimes appears and sometimes doesn't, depending on who you talk to, is the season that appears around August. So the kind of splitting of winter into 2 different parts. So we do a little bit of a, you know, have a look, understand this a little bit more, and talk about, you know, what kinds of things are we familiar with, you know, as we see the seasons change. You know, have we ever noticed some of these things ourselves? So things like particular flowers or the prevalence of different animals or a particular insect that's starting to form cocoons, or different, all those different indicators that we actually have probably seen but haven't really thought about in much detail. There's also a couple of other prompts there I put on the slide, like we could talk about how knowledge of these changes would have been useful for survival, finding food, also how climate change might impact these seasons, or even human influence has impacted the prevalence of some of these things. So do we still see emus around here? Do we, are all of these species still, in big populations, or are some of them threatened? There's also connections with the night sky. So there's that connection with the understanding of astronomy, and for example, the dark emu that is identified as the dark space within the Milky Way, different points of the year, the orientation of the emu changes, and apparently that was used to signify different parts of the actual emu's breeding cycle, and would indicate when it was a good time to harvest the eggs. And this is another opportunity to talk about sustainability, and that it was customary not to take all the eggs, because it was it was understood that if you took all the eggs you would upset the breeding cycle of the emus. So this brings us to the task that I'm actually going to present about, which is our illustration of the seasonal calendar. So what students need to do is choose a season from the Indigenous seasonal calendar. They research the plants and animals that are a focus of that season, and then they find an image, or they Google it, they find a fact page about it, they might look it up on Wikipedia, and they find a good picture that shows good scientific detail, and they draw a scientific illustration of that plant or animal or whatever it is that they've found. And they can choose, they could zoom right in and draw just a claw, just a beak, just a seed pod, or they can draw the whole animal or whole flower in different stages of its growth. The idea is that it's a scientific illustration, so they draw it with a pencil and then they add realistic color, and then they write the common name and scientific name next to it, and they cut it out and they paste it onto the seasonal calendar where it belongs. So you actually create a visual calendar just like the one I showed you on the previous slide. So we do a little bit of, okay, what is scientific illustration? Look at some examples of scientific illustration of different things, cells and flowers, and and talk about how these illustrations were really fantastic before we had photography. Lots of people travelled on these, on the discovery ships, who were there just to document what things looked like. And these are some of the things that the students ended up doing. So I'll show you some examples. So we've got cherry bollards, a kangaroo, some different butterflies and flowers, kangaroo apple flower, some kind of cod. There we go. And you can see that, the students aren't all amazing artists, but the idea is that they're having a go and drawing what they can see. So this was our final product last year when we were at school doing this activity. This year we actually did it as an online activity a couple of weeks ago. So we haven't had a chance to actually collate this as a finished product for this year, but this is the one that we did as a class last year. And you can see all the different features of different parts of the year, which the students are really proud of at the end. There's some really gorgeous illustrations there. There was an additional activity I added in this year, which was to prompt students to go out and look for the indicators in the environment around where they lived, and one student wrote a poem which was really nice, so I'll just put that in as well. So noting that during Wurrung season she could see the soft ferns blowing in the wind, cockatoos screeching, and the lyrebirds dancing in the mist. So some of the highlights of this activity are the cross-curricular focus. Also, students show you the other side of them when you're all kind of quietly drawing. It's actually a really nice opportunity just to chat about things which you might not necessarily have, the opportunity to do in a normal science class. There's also the opportunity to discuss related content like changes in environment due to urbanisation and climate change, impacts on Indigenous people, of the arrival of the white settlers, environmental sustainability, and also the idea that you're making something as a whole class that you can all be really proud of. So all of the curriculum links that are relevant, like it covers lots of different things, as well as a little bit of art and some geography and some Indigenous cultural understanding as well. So I've included a slide here of different resources. This here, the I2S2 program through SIRA is really fantastic. It's a whole suite of resources that promote understanding of Indigenous science. It's actually designed for Indigenous students, but it's a really terrific resource pack that you can deliver even if you don't have Indigenous students in your classes. There's the Narangawali link for the curriculum resources and how to embed those across your whole school curriculum. And yeah, some other interesting links there. And that's it from me. I'm going to just hand over to Delano for a moment to see if you'd like to share, Delano, your experience of doing this as an online activity.
Yeah, I really enjoyed getting to do it. Like, I really like that we didn't just focus on one topic and just having to focus on like necessarily the really sciencey side, but we had that opportunity to do something different that we might find easier to understand. And like, I myself am a very visual learner, so I found this very like an easy task to do because it was sort of my way of understanding everything. And I'm a very creative person, and I got to take my creative side into it. And I actually didn't look up any images on the internet for it because I used photos I had myself. My mum is a wildlife rescuer, and so I've learnt a lot about native animals from her, and then this just sort of helped broaden my information. And so now I can like educate my mum even on some of the small things she didn't know about it, and I can also like create an artwork that I'm proud of, but like I can point out different scientific elements in it and different facts about this animal, but it's like a very different approach to what I used to do in like primary school and everything. And I really enjoy how we get to try lots of new things, and it's not the same thing to expect every time. So in lockdown, it's what I really needed, was to do something different and something I didn't expect, because in lockdown, you know, it gets hard having to know that you're going to have to sit down and do a worksheet for every class. So this was an opportunity to get off the screen. You can be creative, you can but combine science and a whole lot of different elements into this one task, and it's still, you know, you did work and you know you worked hard on it. So that was what I really enjoyed.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that was great. Great insight from Delano and Meg. It's good to be able to think about how we're living and living alongside animals within the different climates and seasons in a different way, or in a sort of more in a deeper way. I'm going to open up the space to have a few minutes to share thoughts and questions with Meg and Delano, and don't be shy. Raise a virtual hand to contribute. You can do this by clicking on the participants icon at the bottom of your computer or phone screen, and at the bottom of the window, click raise hand. And I'll get to as many of you as I can in the next few minutes. And any extra questions you can email Meg later on when I email through details to everyone. Should we unmute everyone? Joe? Just unmuting everyone. Any raised hands? Well, I'll start. I loved just how you mentioned about doing that activity, Meg, creating like a reflective personal space when students are doing the drawing, that kind of opens up that space to talk about things that you might not get to speak about during a sort of normal science class. And I think that's a really valuable part of kind of delving into that, the artistic components of science and climate and those kind of big issues, getting very down and detailed in a kind of a quiet, reflective way, just in terms of mental health, but also kind of creative health. That's more of a comment, but I latched onto that because I thought that was a really
I think
nice
Delano
element.
kind of touched on that too, that kind of just in lockdown, especially that opportunity to have a bit of a breather and just do something creative off the screen. I think, yeah, I think I gave you, was it one or two lessons, Delano, to work on that? It was 2 lessons to research and then draw and then upload and share. Yeah.
Wow.
And in the classroom, I think maybe it was even 3 lessons. And it was last year and it coincided with NAIDOC week when we did it. Yeah. So that process, and some students who were really quick, they did multiple drawings. So yeah. And the process of drawing it at like taking time to draw with a pencil, and we had beautiful little palettes of watercolor paint that we got at Officeworks, as little circular palettes of paints. So we had some really nice quality watercolor paints. So once they'd drawn it, they had to then paint it. So it did take a bit of time to do it properly. We didn't want this to, kind of pull it together really quickly. We wanted them to take time. But we'd also previously done an activity called What Leeuwenhoek Saw. I probably didn't even pronounce the name properly, but there's a really great activity of drawing scale diagrams of, I don't know if anyone knows that activity, but you should look it up. It's a really good one. So we'd done a little bit of scientific illustration prior to this activity as well.
Okay. Denise wants to know, she said, awesome activity, and how long would you normally run the sequence for?
Hi, Denise. So that activity, the drawing activity, probably 2 lessons at least, but to really do a good job as a whole class, you might do it over 3. But there's a bit of a build up. There's probably the whole sequence from start to finish would be at least 4 lessons. Yeah, so all that unpacking the climate understanding and looking at different, you could do a standalone activity of kind of look into different parts of Australia, compare what you found, and then launch into now we're all going to look at Wurundjeri. Yeah, probably at least 4 lessons.
It allows for some sort of really in-depth holistic learning.
Yeah.
Melanie wants to know, do you have ideas for an extension activity or class to build further on their learnings?
So to build further on that learning, I think you could, like I said earlier, to do launch off, and if you wanted to investigate one of the other seasonal calendars, that's a nice side activity to kind of understand the different climate indicators in different places and how it's quite different across different parts of Australia.
Yes.
You could even extend it to an Indigenous seasons knowledge of other countries.
Fantastic. Iris says, do the Indigenous season calendars apply for Australia or Australia as a whole, or are they different in different parts of Australia?
Yeah, they're all unique. So they're different in all different parts of Australia, but there's only a few that have been documented. So there's a lot of knowledge that either has been lost or hasn't been documented officially onto the Bureau website. I know there was a PhD student whose his project was actually pulling those, putting them onto the website, for researching them and trying to get them all on there. But unfortunately, I think a lot of the knowledge is kind of disjointed, or just, hasn't quite made it into the right hands yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do local Indigenous elders in your community know about this program you've developed?
We had some visitors to our school recently who ran a PD for all our staff, and I showed them what we'd made. But look, that's part of our RAP, is trying to incorporate, actually trying to get more Indigenous people into our school. That's something that we're really working on. We would love to have some more kind of ongoing regular support, or not support, but interaction and with local Indigenous people.
Sure.
But unfortunately, we don't have a large number of Indigenous students at our school.
Yeah.
Or, we haven't got those contacts yet, but
Yes.
yeah, it's something that we're definitely hoping to build on.
Okay, fantastic. Last question before we move on to Steph's presentation from Catherine. The integrated approach is great. I really like how you look broadly at Australian climates, then going to local knowledge. Have you gone on any excursions as part of this? Only from our home.
Going out, telling kids to go out and have a look around where they live locally.
Have you run this before COVID?
Yeah, so I did it last year when we were on site, and we didn't run an excursion as specifically for this unit, but it's certainly walking around the school and looking for those bio indicators. You could, you don't even need to go off campus, or I mean, it's hard to organize excursions, but for one little activity. But yeah, you can certainly go for a walk around and see, what's in flower, what are the insects doing, what are the animals doing, what's the temperature like. Yep.
So you can turn it into an incursion.
Noticing any changes. We do go out and have a look at things sometimes, don't we, Delano? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Delano. It was really lovely to hear your insights, and sounds like you're super engaged with that program. It's great to hear. And thank you so much, Meg. I know that you have to get away because you've got kids waiting for you.
Right.
But Meg is happy for me to share her email address after the session if you want to ask her any specific questions about her program. So thank you so much. It's been really, really lovely to have you with us today.
Thank you.
And I'll, if you've got any additional thoughts about Meg's presentation and what Delano shared, please add it to the chat, and remember to add any examples of things that you've done as well, because I'll be compiling a list of everyone's shared ideas. So I'll introduce Steph now from St. Columba's. We'll mute everyone again, and I'll introduce Steph. Welcome, Steph. Steph's a year 1 and 2 teacher and a sustainability leader at St. Columba's Primary in Elwood. She has a great passion for sustainability and for helping pave a pathway for her students to be environmental warriors for our planet. As the winner of the 2020 Resource Smart Primary School Teacher of the Year, Steph prides herself on embedding sustainable practices in a fun, creative and engaging way, and works with many environmental organisations around her local area of Port Phillip. St. Columba's is home to the very famous Climate Change Choir, who are a group of students who perform all across Melbourne, including at the MCG for the Resource Smart School Awards a couple of years ago. So let's welcome Steph, and an extra special welcome for her. I think it's 2 students that are with us today who are members of the Climate Change Choir. So take it away, you guys.
Okie dokie. Oh, all good. Okay. Hello, everybody. As Verity said, my name is Steph Young, and I am a 1-2 teacher and also the sustainability leader at St Columba's Primary School in Elwood. I've had the privilege and honour to head up our sustainability leadership role at our school since 2019. And before I kind of start, I'd also like to acknowledge the Boonwurrung and Wurundjeri tribes of the Kulin Nations as traditional custodians and owners of the land, and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. A little bit about our school. I teach at a wonderful little school called St Columba's. We are the little school with a big heart, is what we like to call ourselves. And we're doing all that we can to enable our children to understand the importance of helping others and being advocates for our community and our environment. We are so privileged to have a school that is so close to so many natural and wonderful environments. We are only a very short walk away from Port Phillip Bay, Elster Creek and Elstonwick Nature Reserve. We are so very passionate about sustainability, and we are a 5-star resource smart school. We also have an incredible parent volunteer green team who helps us to embed sustainable practices in our school. Over the past 3 years, our school has been involved in a huge project after receiving a grant from the government. And we called this project Steam Clean the Bay, given we were so close to the bay. Our Steam Clean the Bay project, that ran from 2018 to 2020. It was a massive undertaking of from our school, where we undertook many projects in order to make our school more sustainable. Some of our highlights of our project, there are so many spanning across the 3 years, but the main kind of ones are redesigning our front-facing gardens, erosion proofing, drought proofing all our gardens, investing in stormwater management in order to reduce and address our bay's health threats. Our students also learned a lot and shared Indigenous historical and scientific knowledge, particularly of our bayside ecosystems with the Boonwurrung Foundation, Port Phillip Eco Centre, and we also had guest speakers that were had bay-related fields that they worked in the fields of science, technology, engineering, arts and maths, that came and spoke to many of our students to help them build this knowledge. One of the biggest achievements in our project was all about conducting community engagement activities. That including signage in our schoolyard and outside of our school, involving ourselves in community cleanup days, and of course the famous climate change choir, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about today. And they were all to increase our awareness of the bay's environmental health and the value that the bay has on many, many, many things. So the climate change choir here is just a montage of the fun. It's good to go back and look at the fun that we've had over the past few years before COVID kind of hit us. But the climate change choir was one very, very special project that came out of our Steam Clean the Bay endeavours. Our Year 3/4s, we call them our eco warriors. They worked alongside our music teacher, Chris Lazaro, who's just brilliant, and also the incredible educators at the Port Phillip Eco Centre, to create a song to spread their message of sustainability to our local community. Students participated in workshops, incursions, and lots of learning in their classroom to explore the bay and how they could help to conserve and protect it, and obviously all the animals and plants and wildlife in the bay. Students brainstormed ideas together and settled on a main message for their song. All the ideas and words are written by our students, and the song was created from there. Our music teacher then put together all their ideas into a catchy tune, which you'll see very shortly. Our climate change choir, as Verity mentioned, has performed at many events over the past few years, including the Resource Smart School Awards, an environmental parenting session, the Port Phillip Eco Centre's 20th birthday celebration, the Sustainable Schools Festival, and the Kids Teaching Kids Conference. So I'm just going to stop that there. This is a video of our very special climate change choir. This was probably the best video that I could find, that I could see a lot of them. We performed, as I said, at lots of different other venues, which would have been a little bit better to watch, but this one you could see them a bit better. This was just at one of our assemblies, in a time where social distancing did not exist and COVID was not part of our lives. So that's why we're very close together and gathering as a group. But please enjoy. The choir starts off by talking about a bit of an Indigenous story before we launch into a song. So please enjoy. Hopefully, yeah.
Way back in the dream, in Port Phillip was a large, flat, grassy plain called Narm. The Yarra River, as we know it, flowed deep into the plain. It was called Birra, the River of Mists. The Boonwurrung people were custodians of the land. They hunted and harvested the land and traded with them.
They lived according to the rules of Bunjil, who travelled as an eagle, and Wa, who travelled as a crow. Bunjil was responsible for all of Narm, and Wa had responsibility for the waterway. At one time long ago, the Boonwurrung and other peoples of the Kulin nations began to argue and fight. The land and all the animals were neglected. Chaos descended on the land. The ocean began to rise up and flooded the grassy plains. The people were worried and went to Bunjil for help. Bunjil was angry with the people and told them that they would have to change their ways if they wanted to save their land.
The Boonwurrung people promised to obey by Bunjil's laws. Bunjil went to the ocean and asked it to stop rising.
The Boonwurrung people learned from their mistakes and took care of the land that was left and sorted out their differences with the other people of the Kulin nations. They promised to always care for the children and to welcome them.
We are committed to carrying on the lessons of the Boonwurrung. By nurturing our environment and our fellow human beings, we are making the world a more prosperous place for everyone. Please join in our song and commit to looking after Port Phillip Bay.
Splash
So that is our climate change choir. Every time I watch it, I think, oh gosh, I want to go back to those great times, but I know we'll get there one day. So I'd like to introduce two of my beautiful students who were part of the choir. This was a few years ago now, but they are still at our school, about how they thought, how it was like being in the choir. And so I'd like to introduce, first of all, Heidi, to tell us a little bit about her experience in the choir.
When I was in the climate change choir, I always felt very engaged with the community and going to different events, because I kind of made connections with other people there and had a chance to sing about matters that kind of meant the most for our area. So I kind of felt like I really enjoyed doing that.
Thank you, Heidi. And I've also got another beautiful student, Martha, who's also going to share a little bit about her experience as well.
Hi, I'm Martha. I'm 10 years old, and in grade 3 I was part of the climate change choir. And to spread the word about the problem of plastic pollution in Port Phillip Bay, as we all know, we created a song. It was an incredible experience for me as we got to perform at many different places, such as our school, as you saw then, the MCG, the Sustainability Festival, and many different other places.
Thank you, Martha. Basically, the arts enable many people to creatively get across their messages in lots of different domains, but particularly sustainability. I've found if in my 8 years of teaching, exploring important ideas, topics, and understandings is only enhanced through the arts in my eyes. So I strongly encourage educators to think creatively and involve your students as much as you can, as your messages, and more importantly, your students' messages, can have a far greater impact on our world if they've kind of had a say and it's done in a fun, engaging way. At the moment, our choir is on hold, and we have high hopes that it'll make a comeback with new songs and with more messages of sustainability from its future students to share with the world. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you to my brilliant students for joining me and for being part of the brilliant climate change choir.
Thank you. Thanks so much, St. Columba's, and Heidi, Martha, and Steph. It was really amazing to hear from you, and to hear that song was uplifting. Absolutely. It was really nice to hear that.